Good morning and welcome to the fourth of our weekly Meet the Experts Q&A sessions with Sintons Employment Team. My name is David Pritchard and I'm the Head of Marketing at Sintons. Now, I know I've said this every week, but can I just once again thank you for the amount of people that have provided us with questions, signed up to the sessions today, and also the amount of people who have been watching the sessions afterwards on the website has also been really, really impressive. So thank you for engaging with these sessions. Very, very quickly, just move on the slide. As you can see the pictures of our wonderful team. As with previous weeks, the employment team are going to answer 3 or 4 questions, either COVID related or not, that you haven't quite got to the bottom of or that your employees are persistently asking you. Our speakers today are myself introducing, Head of Employment Keith Land, and back with us is Ailsa Hobson. Ailsa's going to start, so without any further ado, I'm going to pass you straight over to Ailsa. Ailsa, good morning and over to you.
Thanks, David, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to jump in with the first 2 questions before I hand you back over to Keith, although I'm sure that you're all sick of the sight of him at the moment. So the first question that I'm going to deal with relates to casual workers. The question that I've been asked is, once furloughs come to an end, can I drop casual worker hours down to 0, or do I need to include casual workers in my redundancy process? So a lot of my clients have placed their casual workers on furlough. But before doing this and before we knew the scheme applied to workers, the question that was put to me was, can they just reduce hours down to 0? And my answer to that was yes, provided that they've not been working regular hours so as to imply any mutuality of obligation, which is the obligation to offer and accept work. So this is the criteria that's absent in relationships with casual workers but present in employee relationships, who generally expect a minimum number of hours. So it was determined by many that taking the decision not to offer hours for casual workers was not in the spirit of the retention scheme, and a large proportion of the casual workers were placed on furlough under a furlough agreement that was similar to that provided for its employees. One of the key differences in the casual worker furlough agreements that I prepared was that I included a clause that stated that at the end of furlough, the normal terms applicable to the engagement would resume, and receiving regular payments whilst on furlough created no right to a guaranteed minimum number of hours or a guaranteed minimum payment when that scheme came to an end. So the purpose of this clause was to make it clear that at the end of furlough, hours and payments would not become regular, which was in line with the arrangements prior to furlough coming into place. So if you're comfortable that the regularity of the hours pre-furlough has not implied a guaranteed minimum number of hours of work, so created an employment relationship, then there's no obligation for you to offer any hours after furlough, and the workers can remain in your bank until work is available for them. So skipping straight to the redundancy point, genuine casual workers do not qualify for redundancy payments and do not have unfair dismissal rights. So note my use of the words genuine casual workers. So there'll need to be an assessment of the regularity of hours, which I've just talked about before any of us jump straight back into normal practices. So hopefully that answers that question. Keith, do you have any comments before I move on to question 2?
I think the important point is the assessment that you talk about in a way, because with any 0 hours contract, that there is a period, or it may be very, very flexible, it may be more regular in terms of the hours and the provision of work, and so if somebody has, for example, done 20 hours a week before furlough for the last 3 years on a 0 hours contract, it's going to be a sort of a change of status to return them straight back to 0, or to return them to 0 and offer them no hours, and likely it's going to be a breach of contract in that sense. So that assessment of the genuine position, I think, is the key as to what you do at the end of furlough, but nothing else other than that. So question 2.
Right, I'll crack on with question 2. It's quite a quick one, really, which is always nice. So I think that's why we've done 4 this week. So the next question is, do I need to give each employee a breakdown of their annual leave entitlement where the accrual rate of holiday has been different, for example, only statutory, during furlough? And the easy answer to that is only if they ask for it. So this is a calculation that you're going to need to do for every employee in any event as part of your own internal administration. So I wouldn't recommend putting yourself to any unnecessary administrative burden and informing each employee of their new annual entitlement in one go. Only have that information ready if they do ask for it, which they undoubtedly will when the end of the annual year is looming and they want to know what or how many holidays they have left to take. But it is a calculation that you're going to have to do, so it's best to have it ready, but I wouldn't necessarily go to the full extent of giving every single detail just when everyone goes back to work. I think you'll have a lot more to do other than that. Keith, do you have any comments?
I don't have anything on that, to be perfectly honest with you. So should I just crack on with question 3?
Yeah, crack on.
Okay. The questions up there on the slide: how many employee representatives need to be appointed across sites, and how can we facilitate this without breaching data protection and information sharing? What this is getting at is the requirement to appoint employee representatives in a collective or mass redundancy exercise, or that's how I've interpreted the question anyway. I'm assuming in the answer I'm going to give, these are elected reps rather than you have any union recognition procedures, because if you have unions recognised in the business, the first stage in a collective consultation exercise is that the union reps are appointed as the employee reps generally. If there's non-union reps, you then have to elect an employee representative group to collectively consult with. So the answer really depends on the business. Typical employment lawyer's answer in that there's a complicated answer, but the real answer is set out in section 188A of the Trade Union Labour Relations Consolidation Act 1992. If you're a dullard like me and you want to go and read it, there it is. Just put it into Google and it will pop up. And that sort of deals with the arrangements that an employer must put in place to elect employee reps. The good thing is it's the employer to make arrangements for the election to be fair. So everything is generally in the employer's hands, subject to some provisos, which I'll get onto. The number of employee reps is to be determined by the employer. So again, that's within your gift. However, sufficient numbers to represent all employees. There's no strict format in that sense, and so you've just got to look at your business sensibly and pick a reasonably manageable number. If you have a workforce of 30, maybe 2 or 3. If you have a workforce of 500, you might need a few more, maybe 10. It really depends on how your business is worked and operated. What you also have to do is ensure that the collective consultation body represents the number and classes of employee in the business. So I've touched briefly on numbers. What do I mean by classes? Well, your business might be separated into divisions, therefore you've got people operating in different divisions. For example, if I take Sintons as an example, we have our employment lawyers who are on the call today. We then have corporate lawyers. We then have property lawyers. If we were doing this kind of exercise, you would probably say you need to have people from each of those disciplines sat on the consultation committee, because only those people can really represent the interests of the different disciplines, because they are all very different in how they operate. You've then got to think about the classes, so that divides your business up vertically. You've then got to think about it horizontally, because you might have different grades of workers. So again, you've got to think about that. You've then got to think about different sites. So really, you need to have a consultation committee that is representative of all of those things, but at the same time is a manageable number. So in a sense, what you can then do is you don't have to, there is flexibility within the rules for you to say, well, actually, we'll have a constituency model, which is the one that I've just talked about, which is operating your business, doing the consultation in the silos, such as employment, property, and or corporate. Or you can just say, right, I'm going to have a committee that's going to represent the workforce as a whole. Now that is again in your gift. But again, if you're having one that represents the business as a whole, you've got to ensure that you've got people like managers, shop floor workers on there, so it is representative of the business. You've got to state the term of office. Is it going to be for just this one exercise, or should another one arise in the future? All of the candidates to be elected need to be affected employees. And when I say affected employees, that's not just those being dismissed, it's those whose jobs are affected after the redundancy's taken place. So if you cut your accounts team in half, you need to have representatives of both those people that will stay and both those people that will go. No one employee should be excluded from standing as an employee representative. That's the collective consultation angle. Data protection, I think, is really easy in this instance. Don't be concerned with it is the short answer. Yes, you will be processing information on employees and that will be personal data, but you can easily fit within within most of the exemptions that allow you to process that personal data. So first, people have to put themselves forward to act as employee reps, and so they've arguably given their consent for people to have their information, because how do they do the job otherwise? It's necessary. Well, data processing can be necessary for the performance of the contract to which the employees are subject. How do you consult in this scenario? And how do you get the representatives to do their job without giving their information to other employees? Therefore, I think it's necessary for the performance of the employment contracts. You can process data where it's necessary for a legal obligation of the employer. The employer has to go through a collective consultation exercise if it's making 20 or more employees redundant at one establishment. Sorry, 20 or more at one establishment in 90 days or less. And therefore, there is a legal obligation for the employer to do this. Consequently, you can process data. Latterly, you also have a legitimate interest in doing it, and there's another exemption. So don't get concerned about data protection, in my view. That's my breakdown, Ailsa. Anything I've missed?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I suppose I would say is when you're doing your review or deciding how many representatives to elect, keep a record of why you decided what you decided to do ultimately, with the justification, because I think if you can show you applied your mind to that analysis or that assessment, then it goes a long way if it were to become litigious in the future. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that is a really good point. As with all things redundancy, there are many ways to go on a redundancy exercise. And so long as an employer has applied their mind to something, as Ailsa points out, thought about a certain question and gone in a certain way, it can only be unpicked if it's a decision that no reasonable person will make, because there's a cross spectrum of businesses and and it's down to you guys to run your businesses how you want. I'm waffling on again. I always spend too long on these things and I get told off. Anyway, okay. Next question. If we need to consult with an individual regarding redundancy and they're on furlough, can we leave them on furlough, hold a virtual discussion and keep them on furlough during a short at-risk consultation period? The furlough guidance initially said nothing on this point and everyone was sat there scratching their heads. The furlough guidance says once somebody is furloughed, they can't make any money for your organisation and they can't provide services for your organisation. And when I refer to services, I think that links to the first point, which is money-making services, i.e. then their normal duties. Consequently, I think so long as they are not stepping into that territory, you're probably going to be fine. You then got some later guidance that came out when people put this point to the government because they were considering making redundancies. And I had scribbled on my notes. Yeah, employees who are union or non-union reps can undertake duties for the purposes of individual or collective representation of employees, but again, must not provide services or generate revenue. So in short, people can, it doesn't break furlough for somebody to act as an employee representative, okay? Consequently, it follows that it mustn't break furlough to be able to go through a collective consultation or an individual consultation exercise during furlough. If it would, or if it did, the government's sort of exemption for people acting as employee reps seems a complete nonsense if you can only do a fraction of a redundancy exercise. So in answer to your question, yes, I think you can go through a redundancy exercise without breaking furlough. So you leave the people on and you consult with them. And I don't think it will break furlough if you're consulting with the individual employees rather than the employee reps, because otherwise you can only do half the job, which does not make any sense whatsoever. Can you hold a virtual discussion? Well, I suppose if people are working at home, there's nothing wrong with that. The definition of an individual to comply with the rules on consultation, the process has to be fair in all the circumstances, and so I suppose it depends on where your employee is in the country. Can they get into the workplace? I tend to think that these kind of discussions are better held face to face. You can hold them face to face if you want, so long as you socially distance, given the rules and for keeping workplaces safe. Could you hold a virtual discussion in these circumstances? I suppose you can. We have to bend the procedures at the moment to take account of the current climate. For example, court hearings are banned and they're being done as virtual hearings, and so I don't really see how the tribunal service could really bellyache about it. What's important actually is that you communicate with the people. To be perfectly honest with you, you go through the required information as to why they're redundant, how the redundancies come about, why those people have been picked, why they've been selected, and that you follow up all of that in writing and that they have all of the relevant information. And so long as you do that, it strikes me that are you going to be penalised for holding a virtual discussion in the current circumstances? I very much doubt it. It's the information and the communication that's important. Anything from you, Ailsa?
Just a couple of things, 2 points. For the first point you were making about the actual redundancy consultation exercise, I view that very much the same as a disciplinary performance management grievance procedure, none of which necessarily need to pause during furlough, don't provide a service or create revenue, but ultimately they are necessary and you can come under criticism for delaying it. So redundancy, albeit has a different focus, I view it procedurally in the same way that it wouldn't necessarily break furlough. We don't know that yet, but that's my view. And I suppose on the virtual side of things, it's important to factor in, while you don't have the statutory right necessarily to be accompanied to any of the consultation meetings, potentially the dismissal meeting, you can still, I suppose, facilitate the right level of support virtually, but I suppose it's something that you want to factor in, but also factor in if you were to hold them in person, because you've got an extra body potentially there in the room. But I think it's just something to think about. But given everybody's getting so used to operating in this way as a form of communication, I think provided it's facilitated in the right way, then it's good to go.
You can use Teams just like this, and everyone's on the call. What's the problem, if you see what I mean? We can all see, well, we can see each other. We can't see you punters out there, but
although Keith does refuse to come on the video call first thing in the morning for our team meetings.
I do.
I think it's because he's still in his pajamas.
Moving on, David, over to you.
Thanks very much, both. I don't really know what to add to that, so I'll just move on and conclude. As I mentioned previously, we're working hard to produce and deliver useful and relevant content, articles, podcasts, blogs, videos, Q&A sessions like this. We put up our end of furlough employment video yesterday, which had some fantastic interactions, about an hour and 10 minutes. So I would suggest that you take a look at that one. All of these can be found on our website, www.sintons.co.uk, and that includes episodes 1, 2 and 3 of these sessions. And you can also follow the employment team on Twitter @SintonsHR for all the up-to-date content. If you'd like to raise anything further that the team have discussed today in this session, in any of the other sessions, the details are there on the screen. Any other legal inquiry, obviously, please just let us know. Bringing these sessions until the end of May, so next Friday is our last one. I will pop the details round after the bank holiday weekend. So from Keith, Ailsa and myself, thank you very much for listening again today. Have a great bank holiday weekend, stay safe, and we'll speak to you next week. Thank you.